Greetings, friends and fans of G.I. Joburg. My name is Steven, and I'm introducing you to the laziest G.I. Joburg video ever produced. But I'm on a roll, and I wanted to release something. So it's time to do a completely subjective, completely personalized top 10 list of the most important G.I. Joe and Cobra action figures of all time, for yours truly. Here come the hands in the frame. Starting at number 10, we have Blaine Parker, G.I. Joe's computer specialist, codename Mainframe. Basically every mission revolved around getting him into Cobra's most inner sanctum in order to steal computer files and basically derail the organization using information systems. With our enormous computer that has not one but 2 floppy drives, Blaine Parker became a very important figure to me, and was only made more cool by the fact that he was in fact the earliest G.I. Joe figure I'd ever purchased. Without realizing it, I'd gotten this guy back in the days where Action Force were still putting out cards, and G.I. Joe were then pasting the G.I. Joe logo over them for domestic releases in South Africa. So this guy was a vintage that predates most of my other Joes. Coming in at number 9, we have the Range Viper. Now this guy evokes old school Cobra by having the blue, but he gives it a veneer of hardcore. I mean, check out that helmet. If that doesn't scream spooky to you, I don't know what does. It's definitely an intimidating look. And the gun is the cherry on top. But I lost that pretty early in the game, and I'm glad I got a replacement, because it's nice to have the grenade launcher and the backpack correlate, because you got plenty more firepower where that came from. But since Range Viper was sculpted with all this brass across his chest, I always saw fit to give him a machine gun. And what better machine gun to give him than Sub-Zero's? It fits the color scheme to a T and looks very, very intimidating. Yeah, get some. Coming in at number 8, we have another very significant G.I. Joe figure, Lady Jaye. Not only is she an important character in G.I. Joe mythos, but to me personally, she was my very first eBay purchase. I was all of about 14 years old, using my father's credit card. In any case, Lady Jaye opens up an interesting question. To those of you who played with G.I. Joe and were male, how did you figure in the female characters? Did you ever use them as protagonists, or were they merely supporting characters? I, for one, used Lady Jaye as my protagonist for a long time. I mean, why not? She's tactical, she's espionage, she's also a pilot. So she kind of fitted in everywhere. She'd be the one flying the chopper and leading the assaults and going deep undercover. She was the linchpin of my collection once I got her. And that's interesting because a male playing as a female, was that my first foray into like cross-dressing and adopting a feminine persona? What's that all about? Be sure to leave a comment about how you used to use your female figures in the comments below. At number 7, Lowlight. Version 3, according to Yojo.com, but you know, Slaughter's Marauders Lowlight was essentially the first version of Lowlight re-released. This guy is fantastic. You know, the original Lowlight is cool, but this one has just so much more going on. Removable helmets, which has that drop-down visor anyway, and anything with a red lens back in the day was night vision goggles, simple as that. I know there are more rational explanations of why you would use a red lens in night combat, but I like to just play it out as like a glowing red visor that allowed him to see at night. Awesome. He is not rocking his standard sniper rifle. Instead, he comes with a silenced submachine gun, which leads me to believe that this guy is, you know, he's not just a long-range sniper type. He actually is in the field doing the dirty work, up close and personal, with a 9mm SMG and a silencer. In a alternate timeline kind of game that me and my friends used to play, Lowlight was in fact part of a G.I. Joe resistance movement in a Cobra-occupied North America, and he was tasked with high-profile assassinations of Cobra bigwigs. He's also the guy who spills the beans to our protagonists during that game, a trio of Cobra agents working to flush out the Joe resistance. But these Cobra agents are not who they appear to be. And they actually wind up being drafted onto the side of the resistance. Very exciting, and actually predated my watching of Worlds Without End. So, alternate reality type universes where Cobra was on top was a popular play pattern for me and my friends. Oh yeah. But it's time for number 6. And this is an example of the importance of packaging, because it was the artwork that sold the figure. It's 1988's Hydra Viper. And take a look at that. Was that just not the creepiest, spookiest, evilest card you've ever seen? Yeah. But taking a look at the figure, he kind of falls short of the spookiness of the card, but it didn't matter because they had my money already. This guy is significant not just because of his most apparent stylings. I did not use him as much of a diver type character. No, with that helmet on, he was a mutant. Only made more obvious by his obvious adaptations to living in the deep. But this guy became somewhat of a named character. He was the son of Destra. And his name was, I don't know how I came up with his name. Forgive me, I was very young. His name was Quintus Destra. He, yes, I suppose has blow-up doll lips, but back then it was part of a sort of a blood-sucking fixation. I mean, because he was a mutant, he was also a bit of a vampire, and that's how he maintained his superhuman strength and agility, by basically latching onto the necks of his victims and draining their life force. This claw, or I suppose fin, is also razor sharp, can slice throats. He can spread his arms and deploy a sort of squirrel suit to glide short distances. Yeah, basically this guy was imbued with a whole lot of powers. Oh yeah, of course, with the fins on, he could deliver a nasty kick. Those claws were particularly sharp, and I think venomous. So this guy was a lot more interesting than he was made out to be on just purely the surface level. Also, his manta ray was part of his mutancy and could fly and attack enemies and then come back to him. So yeah, important integration of the animal companion, which was actually not just a swimming creature, but a flying creature too. But that's enough from you, Quintus Destra. Let's move on to number 5. Cesspool from 1991. Now, to my mind, he was not just the head of Cobra's environmental destabilization bunch. He was a very grizzled an important character in a more science fiction type setting. Science fiction, you say? Well, I liked characters with mutilations, to be captains of vessels and leaders of intergalactic bounty hunters and stuff like that. And Cesspool was perfect in that regard. I actually just went as far as to call him Scarface. Nothing wrong with that, because he's got a face, and it's got a gigantic grisly scar on it. And a robotic arm to further help him be in the sci-fi setting. His coloring is terrific. I love the dark green, the purple, the big cobra symbol on his chest. Very, very formidable and very intimidating. But what's more, my specific Cesspool has a special action feature. Detachable robot arm. Yeah, man, you can have those sequences of him like taking it off and repairing it. Gold plastic is not very sturdy, and I think I threw him at the wall for some reason. I don't know why. I was just feeling aggressive, maybe. Or maybe it was part of the game. But anyway, it's really cool to have him able to yank his own arm off. Much better. Next up, we have a favorite of a friend of mine, which has grown on me because he is very realistic. Dusty. Coming in at number 4. Every time I see this figure, I just want to play with him. He's the kind of action figure that is so nondescript and yet so much the kind of everyman troop that in a very, I don't know, subtle manner, he could save the day. He could be the guy who turns the tide, just the right guy at the right place at the right time. And his desert stylings make him perfect. He's always the guy on the Silver Mirage or Striker crushing through the desert, and I'm always reminded of how my buddy Alistair used to use this guy as a kind of a one-man army, just picking up guns, spraying them, picking up another gun. He would typically be outfitted with landmines and an AK-47. He was the kind of on-site procurement kind of guy. Just an absolute survivalist in every sense. And I love the integration of soft goods on the figure. But as I say, significant to me because all I want to do when I see this figure is play with him. He's just the business. We're into the top 3, everybody. And coming in at number 3, Overkill. Now this guy works sublimely in a sci-fi setting, which is something that I would often indulge in with G.I. Joe. He has a lot of features. His face sculpt is full of character. He has a flip-out chest gun. His file card information points to the fact that he has a hidden flamethrower over there. And something that I really enjoyed using, something that I kind of invented really, since I enjoyed playing Bionic Commando. I don't know if you remember the game, but his hand is not just removable, but it also functions as a kind of a grappling hook / repelling line. He'd fire off his hand, very anime style, and he would grab onto something, and off he would go, like Spider-Man, I guess, which kicks ass. He also came with 2 very fascinating weapons. This one I made out to be some kind of electromagnetic pulse gun, which would be able to shoot right through walls. It was sort of a hyper cannon, which would fire supercharged, super speed projectiles, which could, as I say, penetrate armor and fire at high ranges and high velocities. His second weapon, or is it his 4th weapon by now, is this one, which attaches to his hand and is actually a mind control device. He would grab hold of hapless individuals. Okay, behave. Fuck. He would grab hold of hapless individuals and would then zombify them into an agent of his. Go forth, do my bidding, my minion. Time for number 2. It's Shockwave. This is my original Shockwave, and he's seen better days. He's part of the floppy leg brigade, of course, and plenty of yellowing on his powder blue. But this guy was perhaps my primary protagonist right through my childhood. Simply because, and those of you who have older brothers or sisters, older siblings, can probably attest to the fact that their opinions mattered a lot. So going through my childhood G.I. Joe shoebox, my brother Mark pulled this guy out and said, this guy is the coolest, he is the man. And that really galvanized my opinion on Shockwave. From the bagginess of his clothing, the cool boots, the anonymity that came with his face sculpt. I mean, he could be you. He was a masked G.I. Joe. and therefore you could do a lot of imprinting upon him. He is immaculately designed. I love everything about him. He just screams action to me and really fit the kind of play patterns that I really liked playing in the day. I mean, he was the kind of guy who would infiltrate the enemy compound, release the hostages, get the nuclear launch codes, disable the launch, take on the main bad guy in his throne room, and save the day as he walks in slow-mo away from the explosion with his head bowed. I mean, he was just the man. And I promptly lost all of his accessories except for his backpack. This knife is not his original knife. It is a repainted Astro Viper knife from a weapons tree. But it don't matter, because he's packing 2 sidearms, and I would just pretend his empty hands both held guns. So he was my dual-wielding badass. But that's enough about Shockwave. If Shockwave is my number 2 most significant figure of all time, who the heck could number 1 be? Well, I suppose this character had to make it onto the list somewhere. And why not make him number 1? Yes, folks, you probably guessed it. It's Snake Eyes. But perhaps the version that I'm going to choose will surprise you, because it is in fact version 3 of Snake Eyes. Everyone's got their favorite, right? But for me, version 3 just screams action. I mean, from the incredibly well-equipped sculpt to the fact that he comes with a lot of weapons. I mean, I'm not an animal companion type guy, so I'd gladly trade a Timberwolf for a blow dart gun and a 3-section staff. Yeah, you bet that's how we used to play with it. Anyway, Snake Eyes, in his purest distillation, came with this amazing sword, which I can only imagine those holes giving it some kind of acoustic as you would swing it around. He's got the grenades, he's got the trench knives, which often got reference in the comic books. And so we finally got a Snake Eyes that reflects that. He's back to wearing goggles, which is my preferred look for Snake Eyes. I've never understood that, I don't know, medieval / French trench warfare type visor. The submachine gun is gorgeous. The hook was always a mystery to me, but this was a very, very coveted gun, and one that we only found later. It had gone missing. In fact, my Snake Eyes had gone missing. This is in fact Rob's Snake Eyes. Mine got stolen. It disappeared very early on in 1990. The backpack is great. It's far more detailed than his previous backpack. You can actually see the blow darts, you can see shurikens, you can see climbing claws. He's got plenty of rope, and who knows what else he's got in there. Perhaps ammunition, perhaps C4 plastic explosive. Your imagination can go wild. There's a great texturing on him, which version 2, which everyone loves, lacks. Version 2 is very flat. This one, he's got a lot of detail. It's terrific. Only 2 colors, but that's all it needs to be. It is Snake Eyes after all, and everyone wanted to play with him. But back in the day, if you wanted to play as Snake Eyes and you got dibs on him, you would be reminded by everyone else that if you chose Snake Eyes, you cannot speak. It was always a toss-up, particularly for me, because I'm very vocal, of course. So to have a character that couldn't speak was an exercise in restraint. But then again, I very seldom got to play with him. And that's probably why he's number 1. Because now, as an adult, none of my friends are stopping me from playing with him. But yes, he is a very significant figure. Hey, it's Snake Eyes. It's the most significant G.I. Joe character there is. And this, my friends, is my favorite version of him. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Steve's completely subjective, completely personalized top 10 list of the most significant G.I. Joe and Cobra action figures he ever owned. Hope you liked the personal stories. Feel free to add your top 10 in the comments below. With reasons, of course. I want to hear the backstories. Yo, Joe.